Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Cavan-Smith. Tonight, we're back on air. Only 2 of the 4 TV stations shut down by the Kenyan government last week resume transmission. This despite a court order that all be allowed to broadcast. The crackdown prompts protests. Also, you are responsible for your own nightmare. Ethiopia pulls no punches, with delegates gathered to start another round of peace talks between South Sudan's warring sides. Tens of thousands have been killed in 4 years of civil war. And a flamboyant and passionate conservationist is found killed in Kenya by what police believe was a botched robbery. Esmond Bradley Martin was a leading figure in the investigation of the illegal sale of ivory and rhino horn. But first, in Kenya, some of the TV stations shut down by the government last week had their transmission restored on Monday. However, 2 others forced off air 7 days ago are still out. The move to censor coverage of an opposition mock inauguration also prompted a showdown between police and protesters demonstrating against the government. Our correspondents report.
These activists and human rights defenders are protesting in Nairobi against the government's shutdown of 4 TV stations.
I'm here as a member of Kenyan civil society and a concerned Kenyan citizen about what has been going on in this country. And so I'm here today to speak up and to add my voice to the many voices upset about the direction this country is going.
It's an unprecedented decision. Never before have Kenyan TV stations been blocked for so long. It was also illegal. Last Thursday, the High Court ordered that the channels be allowed back online.
KTN and NTV are back up. Citizen and Ainuru TV are still cut, but their journalists were still at work and broadcasting online.
This is the monitor that shows what the viewers are normally receive our signal. But for now, since it is black, it means we don't have a signal for our viewers.
In the news this Monday, the trial of an opposition member who took part in the mock inauguration of Raila Odinga, who declared himself the so-called People's President. The journalists continued their political coverage despite pressure not to broadcast.
We were surprised, we were shocked, because we felt that we have a responsibility to tell the stories, to show what is happening in the country.
Human Rights Watch has warned that media freedoms in the country have been increasingly strained over the past few years.
The process is done. Since 2013, when the Kenyatta administration came to power, we have seen an emerging trend where the authorities are very, very sensitive to criticism. And there has been some kind of hostility from the government.
Negotiations are underway to get the last 2 TV stations back on air, but human rights organizations remain concerned about how this post-electoral situation will evolve.
Scuffles broke out between supporters and critics of South African President Jacob Zuma on Monday as rival rallies were held outside of the headquarters of the ruling ANC party. While many members want the new ANC head, Cyril Ramaphosa, to immediately replace the 75-year-old president, Zuma loyalists continue to push for him to finish his 2nd term and bow out only after elections are held next year. Zuma's time in office has often been engulfed by scandal and accusations of corruption. After several rounds of ceasefire talks having been agreed and broken, South Sudan on Monday began yet another attempt at peace talks to end over 4 years of brutal civil war. As delegates from the IGAD regional bloc met in Addis to host the negotiations, South Sudan's representatives were told that they were the authors of their people's sufferings. Shirley Sitbin has more.
Talks for peace in South Sudan have been ongoing for almost as long as the country exists. South Sudan's rival factions have been at war for over 4 years.
That is your country. This is your people. You collectively, by your political and personal interest, are responsible for the nightmare your own people are going through.
Peace deals and ceasefires have been signed before, but were all broken. The rivalry between supporters of President Salva Kiir and those of his former deputy, Riek Machar, has led to the worst humanitarian crisis in the region since the Rwandan genocide. Tens of thousands have been killed, a third of the population has been uprooted, and leaders have spent millions of dollars on weapons while the population is sliding into famine that is so extreme, rival clans have reportedly been abducting children to swap them for commodities. World powers believe pressure may bring change.
And these measures include travel bans in the region for parties that continue to jeopardize the peace process in South Sudan, and it includes asset freeze and also restrictions on flow of weapons to the country.
The United States decided to apply a unilateral weapons embargo against South Sudan, but experts say the sanction can only be effective if enough countries join the move.
Israel has begun handing out 60-day notices to African migrants, in which time they must choose to either take cash and a ticket to another country or prepare to face jail. A recruitment drive for new immigration agents for the controversial policy has also begun. About 40,000 African migrants and asylum seekers could be affected by the new rules. Rights groups have said that the forced expulsions will endanger lives of the most vulnerable. Authorities in Cape Town have pushed back the date when they'll be forced to turn off running water in the city because of extreme drought. Dubbed Day Zero, it had been forecast for April 16th, but authorities say that huge cutbacks in agricultural use of water has delayed it until May 11th. Residents still have to stick to a 50-litre per person per day limit. In Central African Republic, fighting between rival rebel factions continues to intensify. The clashes have endangered more civilian lives and sparked a new humanitarian emergency in the northern border town of Powell. Our correspondents report.
In position, ready to fire at the first sign of any rebel threat, along a dirt track in the north of the country, an axis on which the UN's MINUSCA mission patrols. It's in the middle of Operation Baranga. Launched in January, the objective is to drive armed groups away from power. The city has drawn around 75,000 refugees who fled fighting between rival factions. On this wasteland, 12 kilometers south of the city, scared people have gathered with UN soldiers who were able to recover some of the guns abandoned by rebel militiamen.
You see this weapon? It's a 12 caliber, a hunting weapon that the rebels are using to terrorize people. We have permanent patrols, which is why the villages are not being burned.
A few hours later, Power is surrounded by MINUSCA troops and some Central African soldiers. A mixed contingent to watch over a population that has more than tripled in just a few days. Numbers began climbing after an outbreak of violence a month ago. Today, there are more than 120,000 people. Here, Adele has welcomed a part of her family onto a small plot of land. There are currently around 50 people here. Food is running out.
We have so many problems. We can't even sleep. We put our children to sleep inside, and us adults, we sleep under the mango tree. We don't even have peanut paste to eat. We only have cassava leaves.
A lack of food in a region considered the breadbasket of the Central African Republic, another consequence of the ongoing instability gripping the country.
A top American conservationist based in Kenya has been killed in what authorities believe was a botched robbery. 75-year-old Esmond Bradley Martin was a former UN Special Envoy for rhino conservation and a leading investigator into the illegal ivory and rhino hoard trade.
A big loss for the international wildlife conservation community. Esmond Bradley Martin, who risked his life to expose illegal sales of ivory and rhino horns on 3 continents, was found dead in his home in Nairobi on Sunday. The American conservationist traveled all over the world to bring attention to the ivory trade, sometimes even going undercover to determine black market prices in Asia. His work contributed to China's decisions to ban the rhino horn trade in the 1990s, and more recently, to ban the domestic ivory trade.
We have about 400,000 to 450,000 elephants in Africa. We're losing maybe 20 to 25,000 a year. Most of that seems to be going into China, where I've been working in the last year or so. And there are these very large ivory markets in Africa that need to be closed down.
Bradley Martin is the second well-known conservationist to be killed recently. South African wildlife activist Wayne Lauder was killed in Tanzania last August after receiving multiple threats related to his anti-poaching work.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.
My name is Maeve McMahon. I'm the Brussels correspondent for France 24. I keep an eye on NATO, Belgium, and all the horse trading that goes